Long ago, a competition was held between two painters, Sisyphus and Perseus. Their challenge: create a painting that is so realistic, no one would ever believe it was a painting. Sisyphus created a painting of grapes, so realistic the birds gathered to eat them. Impressed was Perseus, who presented his painting to Sisyphus. What Perseus presented him with were curtains. Sisyphus, intrigued by the curtains, tried opening them with no avail. The realization struck him as he had been fooled by Perseus, and the curtains themselves were the painting, crowning Perseus as the winner. This painting can represent a lot about our modern society, as we interpret this painting as being fake news or even AI-generated images
sent me laxatives
and content where we, relating to Sisyphus, are fooled by it and believe it to be true to its nature. A painting, a piece of news, or a video on the internet. This rise in fake news reminded me of this specific myth, which then led me to thinking, how many of these myths are still relevant today and can be seen in modern life, such as the myth of the painters. I'd like to begin with what I believe to be the most relevant myths that has been around for centuries and still remains relevant today. This is the myth of Sisyphus, the unfortunate mortal tasked to forever push a boulder up a hill. For some backstory, the myth of Sisyphus starts in Impxtr, where we are introduced to King Sisyphus seducing his niece, who also happened to be his future wife, killing visitors, bearing him gifts, and audaciously tricking the gods twice. The first time, when he bound Thanatos to the chains designed for Sisyphus himself. He managed to do this by pretending that he wanted to understand how the chains worked and used it against Thanatos. The second time was when he managed to escape the underworld by tricking Persephone into thinking that his wife, also his niece, had not given his body a proper burial. Sisyphus remained in the land of the living until his behaviours outraged the gods, and Hermes, commanded by Zeus, dragged him back to the underworld where he would await his fate. His task? Simple. Push a boulder up a hill. Sounds simple, right? Even I could do that. However, as he approached the top of the hill, the boulder would roll all the way back down to the beginning, forcing him to start over again and again and again, forever. In 1942, Albert Camus, a French philosopher, saw the similarities of the world in 1942 and of Sisyphus's task, writing the book The Myth of Sisyphus. The book written by Camus still speaks to us in the modern day, mundane tasks that feel endless with no end goal in sight, which some could compare it to modern day tasks such as washing up, doing the dishes, housework, and self-care, which are all activities you could enjoy, I'm not denying that. However, the point remains that you would endlessly do this to maintain yourself or to better yourself. But how do these tasks reflect Sisyphus, is what you might be asking. If we dig deeper and look at the word associated the most with King Sisyphus, we can see that the word Sisyphean best describes his and our fate alike. The word Sisyphean derives from the Greek word Sisyphos and is best defined as the name suggests: futile, repetitive labour, and the absurd, meaningless nature of the human condition. In Camus's book, he tends to see this part of the myth reflected in the modern world through what he classifies as the absurd, where he defines it as the conflict between the human tendency to seek inherent value and meaning in life and the human inability to find any in a purposeless, meaningless, and irrational universe. Pretty pessimistic, isn't it? This gives a better understanding of how the word Sisyphean is reflected in the modern world through these tasks that I mentioned earlier and jobs people work, making them feel like they are slowly eroding away. I am, of course, talking about scam callers. However, the Sisyphean rule could be applied to almost any job or mundane task around the world, with the job itself going on seamlessly forever with no end. This is not to try and depress you in any way if it's feeling too repetitive, because the other interpretation Camus tried to present to the reader is to instead try and take joy in what you do and live it so that it doesn't feel so endless. Hope is a word that is best used to describe this, as it gives us a way of deluding ourselves to the fact that we are insignificant in comparison to the irrational universe we currently reside in, and to embrace these Sisyphean tasks as part of ourselves. What does it truly mean to have the weight of the world on your shoulders? For some, it's stress. For others, it's lifting an absurd amount of weight and putting your body under immense pressure. Or it could be used to describe the Titan himself, Atlas. Atlas's myth begins when the father of Zeus and many of the other gods were devoured by him at birth. Zeus, having escaped it by his mother disguising him as a rock and later in life poisoning his father Kronos, also known as Uranus, and throwing up all of Zeus's brothers and sisters, giving way for the war between the Titans and the gods. Atlas was one of these Titans who is said to be the main ringleader for this rebellion, and after the war took place, was punished to forever hold the heavens on his shoulders. We get a glimpse of him in the 12 Labours of Hercules, where he is seen holding up these heavens on his shoulders and making Hercules temporarily take his place to fetch the golden apples. The myth of Atlas can be seen in the modern day in many ways through the mental and physical struggle of everyday people. Atlas's punishment of holding the weight of the world on his shoulders can relate to the phrase used by many of us today, even relating back to Sisyphus, where we feel like these tasks we take action in are meaningless compared to our futile existence. This can be seen through mental health issues such as depression, where everything wears you down and slowly eats away at you, stress, where the body is constantly tired and restless and therefore impacting your mind and body, and physical issues like being overweight and obese, where even moving yourself is a struggle and can put immense pressure on your body. A good example of this is the TLC show My 500 Pound Life, where people aren't even able to lift themselves up from a bed or chair. The term of having the weight of the world on your shoulders is a direct comparison to Atlas himself, to feel overwhelmed, stressed, or burdened by immense responsibilities, worries, or troubles. This meaning itself can directly relate to the troubles of the average modern day person. Atlas, unfortunately, never managed to escape this role and will forever hold the heavens up as part of his punishment. However, that is not to say that people who do suffer with related issues such as depression, stress, and worry aren't able to overcome it. With some small changes into how you better yourself and overcome these mental and physical challenges, day after day, you will be able to feel free of the weight of the world.
Strange time we're living in, panic and hysteria. Poor man learn, the rich man don't care. And your narcissist mindset spread like malaria. Sit back and watch.
What does it mean to be tantalized? In the eyes of the mortal Tantalus, it's eternal torture. The myth of Tantalus starts when he is tasked by the gods themselves to cook dinner for them, as Tantalus is the host. There are 3 different versions as to how Tantalus ended up serving his punishment. However, the more gruesome one is a favoured one among the story. To prepare his dinner, Tantalus didn't have many good ideas for making a meal worthy of the gods, and Tantalus isn't a very good chef at that. So to make his dinner as best as he could to appease the gods, he killed and cooked his son Pelops and fed them to the gods. The gods were filled with fury that a demigod such as himself would commit a heinous action to kill his family member and feed him to the gods. Zeus banished Tantalus to the underworld under the watchful eye of Hades and set his punishment up as follows. Tantalus was to be chained in water as high as his neck, and whenever he was thirsty and tried to drink it, the water fell. Above him were fruits. Whenever he tried to reach out to these fruits, a gust of wind would blow them out of his reach. The cycle repeats. Tantalus would forever remain starving and thirsty for the rest of his existence. The story of Tantalus and his suffering can be seen in various ways across the modern world, more in fact compared to the other myths in this video. We can see Tantalus's punishment everywhere in everyday life. Social media, where lavish lifestyles seem just out of reach. Gaming, where the best items are held behind various paywalls. And even to some extent, OnlyFans. This is a bit of a stretch, but let me explain. Where to see beauty, you have to pay to get access to it. This is just some of the ways that the modern world tantalizes us. The meaning of the word tantalize is defined as to torment or tease someone with the sight or promise of something that is unattainable. This meaning fits into the way we are taunted by these items, beauty, and wealth. To be tantalized is much more than being taunted, as it is something that appears to be just in reach but impossible to attain. Let me give you an example. Let's say you have walked into a shop and have seen the most useful and well-designed chair ever. You are filled to the brim with excitement as you are finally able to fulfill your dream of sitting in the most comfortable chair ever. Then you look at the price tag, and it is well above your budget and way too expensive for you to ever be able to afford. The chair tantalizes you. This is a silly example, but the fact remains that its sole purpose of being there was to torment you and let you know that you would never be able to get something like that. This is one of the main reasons why some people these days are so broken in spirit and hopeless, as we are constantly taunted by items, objects of value that are impossible to grasp, advertising, promotional videos on how to get rich, and even softcore all play factors into how the modern world tantalizes us with this value, as we ordinary people will never be able to attain. The best way of avoiding being tormented with all these fruits is to simply block it out. Turn your phone off, listen to music, go outside, find a hobby, or something to keep your mind occupied, which, don't get me wrong, is harder than it sounds. However, there are much better things to do in life than sit in self-pity about how you can never reach these fruits, and instead enjoy your time whilst you still have it. When it comes to ignoring advice that is recommended for a person's benefit, the stubbornness of someone can determine how seriously they take this information or how much they ignore it and fall on their own sword. The myth of Phaeton is one of many that displays this stubbornness. Phaeton, the child of the sun god Helios, was determined to prove to his colleagues that he is in fact the son of the god Helios. Phaeton one day went to Helios' temple and prayed that he would one day be able to ride his chariot across the skies. Helios, hearing this, came down and admitted to Phaeton that 1, he was indeed his son, and 2, he would let Phaeton ride the chariot on one condition: do not use the whip on the horses, as this would send them into a frenzy. Phaeton, brimming with excitement, thanked his father and rode the chariot across the sky. Phaeton was enjoying his ride so much that he had a curiosity of the whip and used it. This then leads to where you think it might lead. The horses riding the chariot went crazy, destroying the crops, wildlife, and Greece itself. Zeus had to stop the chariot by any means necessary and threw a thunderbolt directly at Phaeton himself, killing him and stopping the chariot in its tracks. Phaeton, a young teenager, had his life ended in a flash. This act of stubbornness is seen in many Greek myths. Pandora's box, told to not open the box, and she does. Icarus, told not to fly near the sun, does so and melts his wings. Theseus, told to change a flag on his ship, doesn't and leads to his father killing himself. All of these stories reflect the hubris of human nature, believing that if they do what they're told not to do, everything will carry on as if nothing happened. Curiosity also plays a big role in these myths. To Phaeton's and Pandora's story, Icarus was more of an idiot and acted out to defy his father, rather than being curious to what flying close to the sun would really do to him. The saying, "curiosity killed the cat," is the idiom that best reflects some of these myths, and even in the modern world. The Ocean Gate disaster, where rich, wealthy people went to the depth of the ocean where the Titanic sunk. And if you ask me personally, I wouldn't go there for one reason. The deeper you go in the ocean, the pressure increases immensely, and with the dinghy that these rich people went in being controlled by an Xbox controller, their fate was sealed from the very beginning. Other small acts of this in the modern world are drugs, where people try it out of curiosity and get hooked on it, and are never able to shake their addiction. The best example I found where the myth is reflected in a modern day setting is the scene from Pan's Labyrinth, where the girl is told not to eat the grapes and does so anyway, leading to 2 of her fairies getting killed, reflecting the myth of Phaeton in the most accurate way presented on screen. However, most of these acts could have been avoided by not giving into curiosity and by not being stubborn when given an instruction in the first place, which would have saved a lot of time and their lives.
I need a dollar, that's what I need. Hey, hey. Well, I need a dollar, that's what I need.
Greed, a strong, excessive, and selfish desire for more wealth, power, or material possessions than is needed. In Erysichthon's situation, this was much more personified. Erysichthon took his men to the sacred grove of Demeter to cut down the tree that shielded crops and nymphs from any external threats. As he started to cut this tree down, Demeter, hearing the tree's groans, came down in a woman form and warned Erysichthon of the dangers of cutting down the tree. Erysichthon, being the absolute role model himself, ignored Demeter's warning and cut it down anyway. Demeter, filled with fury, cursed Erysichthon by making him have an insatiable hunger that could never be fulfilled, no matter how much he ate or drank. He would forever feel hungrier. In some versions of the story, he sells his daughter in exchange for money to buy food. However, the end remains the same, where he no longer has access to food through wealth and ate himself till death. This story of greed resonates a lot with how modern companies, Apple, Gucci, and Cadbury charge more for less, draining the life out of their customers and filling up an endless void of the need for more revenue and money. Companies releasing the same product but advertised differently to make people convinced that this is a new product that will give you some status in the world because of the significance of a brand, like having a Louis Vuitton branded item to give yourself some status compared to someone else having an Adidas branded item. Other times it's literally trash, like Gucci, where it can look as ugly as a SpongeBob gross up but still hold value and status as it is branded, meaning that therefore it is somehow good or better than yours. Erysichthon's greed is shown through the manipulation of companies, similar to Tantalus, to average people to get them to feed their profit. Some of the big companies that show this greed are companies such as BlackRock, Discord, and fast food chains, where they constantly push out advertisements for the sake of making it have some higher value in a person's eyes and convincing them that if they buy it, they will have more value over what they currently have, whether that be better quality food for someone, better quality items that are extremely valuable, or icons that hold some wealth, like an NFT. The depth of Erysichthon's greed goes on to say that he also sold all of his belongings to gain money to buy food. In the end, he becomes a beggar, living off the crumbs thrown at him by those passing by. Unaware is the average person on how much they spend each year on branded items to fill their life up and giving into the endless greed of modern companies that will only increase with factors such as inflation and economic crashes, forever gaining money and wealth and having no limit in sight. How could you avoid this? Easy. Don't fall into the trap of buying your wants for the sake of it, and instead find alternatives or not giving into these corporations' actions. Greek myths are a staple in storytelling and an impact on the world itself, both reflecting punishments, warnings, and acts that can make anyone from any time period shocked. These stories both reflect the time period they were told in and reflect some of the issues and problems we, as modern day individuals, face similar to those involved in these stories. By making you aware of the myths themselves and the consequences they face and how similar they are to modern day life, I hope that with this warning in mind of how your life could inadvertently end up like these tragic characters, that you decide to make a change in both your mindset and body to better yourself to assure that you won't end up suffering a similar fate.
Say it again. I'm a lying piece of shit, daddy.
Say it again.
I'm a lying piece of shit, daddy.
Say it.
I'm a lying piece of shit, daddy.